woman will come out of Moab. Her name is Ruth HaMoaviyah, and therefore, just for that, who's going to bring the messianic power to the Jewish people, we're not touching Moab. That's how Rashi, in the name of Chazal, explained. The Chizkuni, one of the great Rishonim in France, in the late 13 and 1400s, says a little different answer. We went to war of avenge against Midian and not against Moab because the bag of sins of the country called Moab has yet to reach an SRO, standing room only crowd, inside the bag. In other words, they have not completed their potential of sins where then they deserve edict, they deserve punishment from God, and therefore Moab is not asked to be avenged against. They deserve it, according to this the Chizkuni, just like Rashi. No, Rashi says they don't deserve it. It's a different answer. And then the Chizkuni brings the same answer that Rashi says, that the Moabites had real, authentic fear, which is not the case of Midian. Another answer is, and we saw it in last week's Parsha, in the present tense. Ki tzorerim. Present tense. The Midianites are still what? Foeing you. They're enemying you. They're still trying to undermine the Jewish people. That's because we saw Ki tzorerim. They're doing it now. They're still doing it now. And they're still a threat on us. We didn't see a threat in these words. But when we go back and see the entire picture, we see that the Midianites are still enemying you. They're still clashing with you, maybe spiritually. They're using their plots, nichleihem, their tricks, how to undermine us, and therefore they have to do it this way. I want to share with you now a unique explanation that the Abarbanel takes. Okay, Rav Yitzchak Don Abarbanel. And he says the following. When we read about Israel sitting in the Shittim, in the place called Shittim, at the end of Parshat Balak, and then we asked what is the connection, here it is, and then the people of Israel started prostituting with the daughters of Moab. And we thought there were two entities, the daughters of Moab prostituting, and the daughters of the women of Midian. Listen to this interesting explanation given by the Abarbanel. He says the following on that excerpt of the men of Israel prostituting with the daughters of Moab. He says, Vayachel ha'am. That's the word we saw, Vayachel. We explained it as latchil, we talked about. But Vayachel could also come from the word chol, the opposite of Kodesh. Excellent. He says, we desecrated the honor by going out and prostituting with Benot Moab that came into our camp, and we prostituted with them. But he says the following. It was really not the daughters of Moab. It was the daughters of Midian. And they camouflaged themselves. They hid their identity by saying, we are Moaviot. And he wants to bring 3 proofs to this understanding. Proof number 1, when the Torah in this parsha describes the crimes done by the various nations, and we learn in the book of Devarim in regards to Ammon and Moab, do not call out to their good, lo tidrosh, shlomam v'tovatam. And remember, a ger tzedek from Ammon and Moab may not enter into the congregation of God in marriage. Okay, he has to marry a Gioret or a Mamzer and so on and so forth. Masechet Kiddushin chapter 4, Mishnah 1, when it talks about the 10 different lineages of the Jewish people. It doesn't mention in that pasuk in Dvarim the sexual immorality of the daughters of Moab. Not at all. It doesn't say that they're the ones that prostituted with us, and they're the ones that brought what's the name of that terrible idolatry? The Peor idolatry. It doesn't say that. That would be the greatest crime they did towards us. So why doesn't it state that when we're talking about the crimes of Moab, later mentioned in the book of Dvarim? Proof number 1, that it can't be Moab. Proof number 2, we do not have a prohibition that you must loathe, not stand or tolerate the Moaviot. We have, what does it say regarding Moab? It says, you shall loathe the men And the men are not allowed to do, after they do Gior, marrying into the camp of Israel. But it doesn't say that the Moabite women are pointed out as doing terrible crimes. If they were the ones that did these terrible crimes, then they would be the ones loathed, disgusted, as it states later in the book of Devarim. And therefore, Ruth HaMoaviyah, when she comes forth and wants to join the Jewish people, from her comes out David HaMelech, had her ancestors been the ones that committed these terrible crimes of immorality, of undermining the Jewish men, certainly she would have been pointed out that she cannot join the Jewish people and marry into the Jewish people. But it wasn't, the girls are not pointed out. They're allowed, after they do Gior, to marry an Israelite and a Levite and so on and so forth. Proof number 2, that it's not the daughters of Moab. The Abarbanel says regarding proof number 3, the fact that the Midianim are now called in this war of avenge to be killed, and all of their booty of Midian, and we're about to see the greater numbers, we'll see that tomorrow, and therefore the Torah says, we read it, be the foes of the Midianim. Tzoror, we learned it in the last week's Parsha, Tzoror to Midianim, asher niklu lachem al dvar por, because they used all these tactics and tricks by doing the por. Now if it was the Midianite women, that did it, in other words, so it says regarding Midian that did these activities. It doesn't say about the Moaviyot. Therefore, it appears to the Abarbanel that they dressed up or spoke a language, camouflaged themselves as being like the Moabite woman, but really, indeed, they are the Midianite woman. Now, let's go to a next point. Moshe Rabbeinu is a tremendous test here. If he goes to war, thereafter, his death is upcoming, as we saw here. And we see here, basically, the praise of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he doesn't tarry or wait at all, but he goes straight to war. What do you want to ask?
I didn't understand the third point that it says in Pasuk 15 in Parshat Matot. Behold, it was
Which parak?
Pasuk Tetvav.
Lamed Aleph Tedvav?
And
so this is obviously talking about the Devar Por is of the Midianite people and not the Moabite people. It's the Midianites and not the Moabites.
Why would the sentence before that doesn't make sense? You should have a female live in...
We're only going to war against Midian and not Moab. So the subject here is strictly, solely Midian and not Moab.
I just didn't understand why the people would bring back the woman then.
So that'll be tomorrow's subject. That leading to your point that you made 20 minutes ago, that we didn't see clear military instructions who has to be killed, who has not to be killed. Gentlemen, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu does not delay, does not tarry, but he goes to war immediately, the famous Midrash in the Sifri talks about it, that he went out and did it b'simcha. Not only did he do it b'simcha, we asked the question, in verse 3, please see it. Vaydaber Moshe Elam Lemor, Heichaltzu etchem. We're not used to the word leichaletz. What does it mean? Rashi decided to bring the Targum, the translation of Onkelos, Lashon Chalutzei Tzava, Mizuyanim. Be armed and go out to war. Okay? However, there is another meaning. Rav Saadia Gaon brings Heichaltzu Zirzu. Quickly, alert. The attribute of alacrity. No daring, no waiting. Like they say in Chicago, Schnell, 1, 2, 3. Let's go out and do the things not waiting. Moshe Rabbeinu could have, called for a timeout. I'll take care of this next month, because he knows his death will come immediately or as soon as possible after the war. So he purposes as no. Hey, Chaltzu. One of the great Hasidic leaders that Rav Tzvi the Kook also would bring in once in a while, Rav Simcha Bani Peshischa. He says an interesting explanation. I learned all this with my dear father, Rabbi Horowitz. Hechatzu me'itchem. Hechatzu is get rid of your own inner being. Hitpashtu me'atzmiutchem. Relieve yourself of your discriminations, your leanings and tendencies. Take away any personal reasons why you want to go to war against them. We need anashim latzava. We need men to go to war for the mitzvah that God is commanding us. We need anshei chayil, men of valor, that their hearts and their actions are attuned one to another. And this, of course, leads us to the understanding why Elef Lamateh. As we're going to see the great numbers of POWs and animals and persons that are taken, we see that the numbers are astronomical. 12,000? It sounds like harikari. Is that a word in Japanese? What's the word for suicide in Japanese?
Seppuku. I think you're talking about seppuku, right?
Kamikaze. I was close. Harikari.
Oh, I think you're also right.
Is it?
Kamikaze refers to the pilots.
Is what? Help us out. What would you bring it from Malaysia? How do you say suicide in Japanese? Kamikaze. That's World War II. In Pearl Harbor or something. I don't know.
After Pearl Harbor. This was like last resort.
Harikari.
Oh, they were starting from the beginning.
Baruch shekivanti to Rabbi Google.
He's the only person I truly trust
I-
besides Rav Kav.
I hope you. Okay, we're not going to tell you it's a corny joke. It's good. Give him a tap on the shoulder for me, please. Gentlemen, Heichaltzu is rizut. Quickly. And that will explain the reason why Elef Lamateh and why they're called Anashim. In verse 3, Rashi says, Tzadikim. For this war of avenge against the Midianites, it's not just a military matter. It's first and foremost the ideals, the values, the ethics of the Jewish people. We fell because of the terrible intent and will of the Midianite people to undermine the Jewish people with immorality.